残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ。
Well, it's been quite some time. That whole once-a-week attempt just fell at the first hurdle. Hopefully this one fills the void as it's shunted out with all the other thousands of videos that have been made about this over 10-year-old game. But I digress. In case you didn't catch the last part, let me catch you up to speed. Ancient Dark, Fire Dark, Dark Undead Dark, Prison, Ow, 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 Sad Die, Giant Bird. Now you're all caught up. On with the show. After a brisk flight that thankfully didn't end in an undead vor fetish video, you're plopped down to a place called Firelink Shrine, which will serve as your hub area. It has all the basic amenities one could ask for in an apocalypse. There's a firekeeper, increasing the number of Estus you recover when resting, a fat loser, teaches you one good miracle and a bunch of crap ones, and a snide, hopeless man who routinely insults you for trying to move 1 inch farther from the bonfire. He does give you helpful hints, but only after tearing you down emotionally. So clearly he's meant to be a stand-in for the public education system. I mean for the player who quits Dark Souls. It's an interesting idea to convey information to the player without breaking immersion with tooltip screens, but it's also very easy to miss and liable to fly over the heads of some players. We'll put a pin in that last little comment because that's something that I want to get back to. Incidentally, if you get annoyed after one too many put-downs, you can just kill him. In fact, almost every NPC in this game is killable. Not that you'd want to hurt this guy. He's so huggable, with his plain armor, stapled on hair, and mouth that never moves. Okay, let's deal with the pen. One of the things I mentioned in the last video was that the original Dark Souls was a huge breath of fresh air, but I never really elaborated on why. You see, back in the early 2010s, there was a major surge of games in the AAA space that were referred to by marketing departments and critics as sightseeing tours. Games that were focused not on providing challenging gameplay or intricate stories, but to provide a more cinematic experience that would show off all the fanciest graphics to investors. Games like Battlefield, Call of Duty, and Assassin's Creed, and every other game that were copying the big boys. The most difficult thing in a lot of these was just finding the energy to finish their banal campaigns of ultra good guys versus child murderers. Enter Dark Souls, which gives you the barest explanation of its mechanics and leaves you to figure everything else out for yourself. It helps that it's a very well-written game with a deep combat system and tight controls, but in a sea of games that tell you exactly where to go and exactly what to do, Dark Souls was a game that respected its players enough to let them forge their own way forward. Speaking of forging your own way forward, you might wonder where it is that you're supposed to go from here. You could decide to venture to the graveyard, come across some skeletons, and then get murdered by said skeletons. From there, you might leave, choose to go underground, and then get killed by a bunch of ghosts that you can't hit. Then, through process of elimination, you'll end up walking up a hill, find some zombies that don't immediately anatomize you on hit. This right here is how you tell which direction progress is. If the first few hits from scrub mobs don't kill you, it's probably the right way. This pathway leads to the Undead Burg, which many new players will become very much familiar with for the next hour or so, depending on your level of patience. It's a cramped, urban environment that is packed to the brim with hollowed-out warriors, so desperate for love and attention that they positively leap at the chance to dig their axes into your jugular. This area is meant to teach you the next lessons of the game. You got your tutorial where you learn how to press right bumper to hit things and right trigger to hit them harder. Now it's time to learn the next level. Combat with more than 2 enemies equals death. Backstabs are cool, but can also be done on you. Danger sits around every corner, literally. And if you see some emo-looking chud off to the side and decide to bug him, they will chase you to the ends of the earth for ruining their internal pretentious poetry session. These guys drop some of the best weapons in the game, but they have the ability to punch your teeth down your throat and out your asshole. So after fun times of traps, killing merchants, and more traps, it's time for a real boss fight. Now you might think that Asylum Demon counted as a proper fight, but he's just a lovable flower child compared to the boss of the Burg, the Taurus Demon. This one is much more difficult for newbies. I think my death count, all told, was around 10 the first go, and it has a lot to do with the venue. Castle Ramparts are not an ideal location for taking on the baby brother of Baphomet, and it's easy for him to box you into a corner while he wails on you. Include the juvenile delinquents firing spitballs at you from the upper ramparts, and you're looking at a rough time. You can make this fight easier by taking out the archers before the party starts via the ladder that's easy to miss when entering the arena. You can even lure over the boss to the upper area and do a plunging attack for significant damage in the second and only time this attack will be useful. This one, however, is less advisable because it puts you back on the lower ramparts, where Demon Boy has the home field advantage. I advise sticking to the upper area, where you have much more room to maneuver and dodge. With Taurus Demon turned to Ribeye, you continue onwards to meet the Sun Cleric Solaire, the husbando/waifu of this entire fucking series. And it's not hard to see why. In a world filled with evil, sad, depressing shit, genuine moments of levity shine all the brighter. And Solaire is an optimistic and charming character, which means that his existence will be to be tortured by this awful, miserable world. Trust me, you don't set up a lovable character in a dark narrative unless you're going to disembowel the poor bastard to make a point. Solaire's also here to justify the existence of multiplayer by saying that time moves strangely in Lordran, bringing figures and heroes from other worlds. It's an in-universe way to explain the existence of all these phantoms, bloodstains, and messages that just say woman, without just saying, it's a video game, deal with it. The next character that's introduced is much less lovable, in that it's a dragon that immediately kills you for the crime of walking across a bridge. Once you stop swearing, reload, walk back from the bonfire, there's a helpful staircase that takes you underneath the bridge and away from the murder hobo dragon. You might think this is where it gets easier, because anything has to be easier than a big fuck-off dragon. You're partly right. This next part is easier than a dragon, but you come across your most difficult opponent yet. A rat. Well, 3, to be precise. I'm not joking. These things are scuzzy little Dahmers that will stunlock and poison you to death if you don't try to dance around them. There is no more humbling an experience than taking down a nuclear fucking monster only to be immediately devoured by a rat. This brings us to the Undead Parish. Noticing a theme here, which serves the same function as the Burg, but introduces new enemy types like the Balder Knight, which are nimbler and much more competent at punishing your attacks. There are also many points where you have to fight in tight corners, which teach you to be mindful of your surroundings. Murder, die, murder, die, murder, die some more, and you'll come across Andre, an accomplished blacksmith with a most magnificent beard. He'll repair and upgrade your weapons, which I'd highly advise that you do, unless you want to try killing the Prince of Darkness with a twig. Not joking, there are people who do this. Also nearby is Siegmeyer, the Mr. Bean of this world. That's not an exaggeration. He's so naive and trusting, he feels like he belongs in a children's TV show about the importance of sharing. Anyway, Onion Boy is flummoxed at the existence of this gate, and is trying real hard to find an answer to this problem. Excluding all the obvious answers, of course. But whatever, we don't have time for Barney the Zweihander Knight's crap. We need to fight an armored prick, a mage prick, and the entire horde of prick groupies in the chapel. And if you haven't learned any of the lessons Dark Souls has been throwing your way, then you're going to be having a little prick trouble beyond the help of any soothing cream. Once the filth has been taken care of, on the altar for the taking is a Firekeeper soul, which can be used to upgrade the healing of your Estus. And when I say use, I of course mean take it to a Firekeeper and pick the reinforced Estus option, because who in the right mind would interpret use Firekeeper soul to upgrade Estus as use the item in your inventory right now? I mean, you'd have to be pretty dense to think that just using the item would grant you the effects of improving your Estus on the spot, and an appropriate punishment for that would be to go through some of the most difficult portions of the early game with only your basic healing, constantly in situations where an extra buff to Estus would be very useful. I'm not salty, shut up. Hey, speaking of pricks, there's another one in the chapel, but this one's behind a locked door, and he's not immediately trying to kill you. He introduces himself as Lautrec, and he promises you a reward for letting him out. And if you start to get nervous when he chuckles to himself, don't be. He was just thinking of his favorite Catgirl anime with slightly lewd undertones. Totally normal things. Now it's boss time, and this one changes things up. It starts with a giant gargoyle statue pouncing on you with designs to separate your top half from your bottom. Once you've gotten it down to half its health, the gods of this universe remember that they're cheating motherfuckers and stick another one on you. The fight then evolves from a one-on-one duel to kiting around so that both enemies are always in your line of sight. It's a valuable lesson to learn, because the duo fight concept is one that will be repeated, sometimes poorly, but we'll get there. You can also summon in Solaire, if you want to say bollocks to that, which I always do, because the only time I ever complain about fairness is when I can actively profit from it. Once the two statues have had their life cruelly taken away, you monster, you're free to ring one of the bells, leaving you no place left to go but down. And immediately down, you meet Oswald, a guy who walked outside with a coat hanger stuck in his cloak, but is too proud to admit it and too lazy to take it out. He's useful if you accidentally piss off an NPC by trying to kill them, or saying their favorite superhero movie is shit. Pay a fee, and it's like nothing ever happened. There's not much else to him, other than probably being an S&M pervert. I wouldn't bring it up, but this isn't the first time we'll run into someone's fetish in this game. During your run in the parish, you would have come across a basement key for the Undead Burg. This leads into the other interesting thing about Dark Souls, how all the levels lead into each other like a living, breathing world. This is where the comparisons to Metroid and Castlevania come in. You'll often come across locked doors or barriers that you can overcome later once you've acquired items from other areas. It's an underutilized mechanic that instills a familiarity with the environment. It's also a mechanic we're going to ignore and immediately go to touch grass. With swords, I mean. No, not like that, you degenerates. One of the entryways in Andre's tower leads to another area, where he shares a bunk with a one-legged demon with daddy issues. At least I think he has daddy issues. Why else does he lash out with an extreme amount of range? It's a tough fight, but you can try circumventing the challenge by positioning yourself between his missing leg and his tail. Then you only have to worry about his bullshit jump attack. This brings us to Darkroot Garden, an emo's version of Alice in Wonderland, as opposed to Tim Burton's film, which is just a shit version of Alice in Wonderland. Anyway, this area is filled with shrubbery with vine-like whips, where I always screw up the dodge timings. They do drop moss consumables that can be used to remove status effects like bleeding, poison, and toxin, depending on their type. We will need the poison type moss for the next area, so grab as many as you can. The other fun type of enemy are these lumbering galoots that hit like a freight train and cast slow for good measure. I advise taking these on one at a time, unless the idea of being bisected in slow motion by an emotionally stunted golem sounds appealing to you. If you're like me, you might be dreading the boss of this zone. Not necessarily for their difficulty, but an area evoking Alice in Wonderland leads to things so incredibly twee that you might lose hope for the continued existence of humanity. That would be at least some form of difficulty, because the actual boss certainly isn't in any practical sense. It's just a giant butterfly that shoots magic. It's annoying that's entirely random, whether it floats down within smacking range, but it's by no means threatening once you get the basic mechanics of the game. I just recommend summoning Beatrice. This entire boss is a wash, 2 out of 10. That's all that I explore in Darkroot at this stage of the game, because anything beyond this point just immediately powderizes me into an unpleasant, moldy fertilizer. Mileage may vary, but we'll get back to this area later, because now that we've gotten some poison remedies, the path to progress leads us downwards, in more ways than one. Hey, if you've gotten this far, thank you so much for watching my video. Sorry this one took a lot longer to get out than I anticipated. Work stuff got in the way, and trying out a new video editing software. Hopefully it turns out okay. Let me know in the comments if there's anything off about it, or what your thoughts are on anything in the video. But yeah, this is crazy. I looked at my previous video, I saw it had 250 views on it, and that's something. I didn't expect that. Thank you so much for the support. I appreciate it. And I'm hoping to have the next part out soon. Have that out on a weekly basis, at least. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye.